Good morning, wanderers and fellow adventurers, and welcome to the next devlog for Daemon Change. In a moment of transparency, I've been really paranoid for the last couple of videos because I know that in certain ways they haven't been the most exhilarating. Boilerplate just isn't fun for anyone, or I don't know, maybe they have been exciting. But let me tell you, this video is the start of everything. In my head, when I first started this project, if there was a point where I imagined things to start to pick up, this is it. We're here. Things are going to start getting really crazy from here on out, so
get excited.
So the big thing so far has been creating a rig and animations. Animation in general is really hard and really time consuming. So first, a quick summary of just what's going on and how animation in games works in the first place. Animation is one of those things that everyone has usually tried at least a little bit, usually in the form of a flip book in elementary school or primary school. You draw a picture and then you draw another picture, but slightly different. And then you do that just as many times as you can without going crazy. What becomes hard to really comprehend is that in grand animations like Disney movies, those are literally the exact same process as a flip book. They're no different whatsoever. You draw something and then you change it a little and then you draw it again hundreds of thousands of times. Mulan, which is one of my favorite Disney movies, would have been over a whopping 125,000 different drawings. Now, 3D animation is exactly the same. Something I've been asked over and over and over again is, doesn't the computer make animation easier? And the answer is fuck no. It changes the nature of your problems, but it is still exactly as difficult with pen and paper. Over the past 2 weeks, just dealing with outside life, I've only managed to fully animate the idle and walking states of the Daemon, and even then, they still need adjustment. But there is a kind of silver lining to what is usually an insurmountable task, especially for just one person, which is, instead of integrating full-blown animations into the game, you can shorthand a lot of them with power poses in order to get an idea for how your animations will feel in the game. Now, this is a technique that I've used for a long time, and it's saving my booty now as a solo dev just as much as it has saved my booty in the past. The way I've set it up in the code so far is that your character cycles through what we would call states. So things like walking state versus running state versus falling and so on. Each state is represented by a power pose, which currently exists as just one frame of animation that's being looped over and over and over again. Now, what's nice about doing it this way is that before I spend 20 bajillion hours animating, I can actually play around in-game with the feel of an animation first. So sprinting is a really good example. When the character sprints, they have these really nice lines for legs, a good lean, and it's just a strong silhouette. So now I know that when the time comes for me to animate this in full, this pose is going to be the marker for what I'm striving for. Now compare that to the poses that I made for rising, floating, and falling, for example. I really like the movement of the arms. I like how they rise and fall as you do, but I really don't like the overall pose of the body. So I can make sure to change and improve that through these poses until I start to find what feels good. So end talk about animation and then begin talk about the effect of animation on feel. Feel is such a driving factor in games, and it's a really unfortunate thing that it's so often ignored. Let me show you something. Here, when my character climbs a tree, you can see that a number of things are kind of off, especially the character who is literally off of the tree. This sort of thing is going to take tweaking to get right. I'll need to adjust the climbing animation, the climbing idle. Here, I can actually adjust the character's visual position, which is different from their actual position, and that will need to be adjusted as well. And this doesn't even begin to cover things like inverse kinematics, which is how my character is going to be able to grab onto surfaces realistically. It's amazing how much effort goes into just feel and not making it feel broken. Which is where full-on AAA games come in as astounding artistic achievements. This game is Monster Hunter Rise. Monster Hunter as a series has never really had things like really complex facial animations, but they have always had some of the best full-body character acting in games. The feeling of drinking potions, of getting hit by monsters, and the power of swinging around monstrous weapons, pun definitely intended, has always been top notch. It's crazy how each person, or I guess each team of people, rather, goes about conveying the idea of weight in their world and how directly that translates to your feel and experience in the game. So Elden Ring, another game with classically large weaponry, feels at the same time as slow and chunky as Monster Hunter and as surprisingly deft and nimble, but both games go about that weight and conveying it in completely different ways. So, which in conversation about animation and feel in other games, and then begin conversation about what we're poised to do moving forward and why things are getting so spicy. The thing is that these poses aren't a separate system from what will be used in the final version of the game. They're not placeholder. All of these animations are being cycled through using Unreal Engine's AnimGraph state machine, which integrates completely with the state machine of the main character that I made. So we can start making animations for things like running and jumping, but also we can start making animations for things like, combat. Going back to other games for just a moment, this is a roguelike called Have a Nice Death. Now, when the player attacks, the way we check to see if they've hit anything is that we stick a large box out in front of the player over their attack animation, and if that box overlaps with an enemy of some kind, then the enemy takes damage. Now, in a lot of games, using a large area box is actually fine, but let's go back to Monster Hunter for just a moment. Here, you can see that my weapons are actually quite precise. I can miss by very small margins and narrowly shoot under arms and beside limbs while I'm still missing entirely. In most action-y type games that use full 3D graphics, there's a very similar method to Have a Nice Death, but instead of using a massive box just out in front of the player, we use a much smaller box that's bound to the weapon we're using. So when the weapon moves, the box moves with it. And that's how we create the illusion of real weapons hitting real targets. But how to get weapon move? Animation, which, might I remind you then, is a fun little thing that we can make our character do now. So in addition to looking better, in addition to making the character move as if they were alive, we can now animate the character attacking, which means that the character can push and pull these boxes out in the world around them, and we can start to interact with that world in much more meaningful ways. This devlog is coming out at the very end of February, and I can pitch some milestones for you. My goal is, by the next devlog, to have rough animations in place for the character, including animations for attacking. With those rough animations in place, we can start to really develop and change how these movements interact with each other and the world. And what that means is that the next milestone after introducing that is an actual combat system in the game. I'm talking combo paths, different weapons, the ability to give and receive damage, which means that as a goal, we're trying to fully introduce combat before the end of March, which, looking even further ahead, means that in April, I'm going to begin working on the first boss. Now, remember, I'm trying to make a game something inspired by the likes of Shadow of the Colossus. That first boss is going to be a big deal. And if it works, if I can manage to make that first boss and introduce it into the game and you can fight it, and that's an even remotely enjoyable process, then this project won't be a question of if anymore. If it works, then soon this game will become a question of when. So that's the game, that's the plan. How do we get there? Discord! And YouTube and probably Steam and the Epic Store and a bunch of other stuff. But for now, Discord! For those of you who don't know what Discord is, it's a free app that lets you use text and voice chat with other people. Think like Zoom meetings, but not shitty. Anyway, I've made a Discord server that is now open to the public, and you too can join it. My patrons have already been talking with me, giving me feedback and getting rapid updates on everything I've been doing, and I want to cordially invite you to do the same. I've been loving talking with you guys in the comments of these videos, and I still intend on doing so, but it is so much nicer being able to have a real-time conversation with you guys. So give it a try, link down below. As always, a big shout out also to my patrons, especially now that I can talk with you guys in Discord. Thank you so much for keeping me in the game, and I'm as excited to keep moving forward now as I was on day one, I promise. Let's kick this into overdrive together, yeah? See you soon.